Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today I'm sharing with you a conversation I had with Novelette Munroe. Novelette is a poet and a hospice volunteer, but she happens to be suffering with a rare genetic condition called Epidermolysis Bullosa, and which is a life-limiting illness, and she has constant medical issues to deal with. But she shares with us some of the stories of her journey and also how she has become a grief counselor herself and how she has dealt with all of the losses and grief in her own life. I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel and also subscribe and leave a rating and review wherever you happen to listen to the podcast. If you're able to help out a little bit financially, you can go to eoluniversity.com/support. There you'll find 3 different ways you can make a small contribution to keep this channel and the podcast on the air. So now we'll move on with my interview with Novelette Munroe. Today, I am very honored and excited to introduce my guest, Novelette Munroe. Novelette is a 37-year-old woman who is a poet, an artist, and a great friend. She graduated from the University of Toronto with a Bachelor's of Arts degree with a specialty in philosophy. During her time at U of T's Scarborough campus, she won an award for creative writing and poetry. Her poetry was published in several Scarborough Fair journals while she attended UTSC. Novelette was born with a rare genetic skin condition called Epidermolysis Bullosa, EB, and she has one of the more severe forms of the disease. Despite dealing with life-limiting illness, she volunteers her time in hospice and peer bereavement in her local community. She has had a passion to learn about mental health, grief, and the intersection of mindfulness on the grief journey. Her passion for educating people on grief literacy has been a driving force in the quest to give comfort to those in need. Novelette has studied with experts such as clinical psychologists, meditation teachers, and a thanatologist, and her volunteer work in hospice has earned her an Ontario Volunteer Service Award. And ever since I started communicating with Novelette, I have been looking forward to this day when we got to actually meet and have a conversation together. And so I want to welcome you, Novelette, and just tell you again that I'm so inspired by you and your story and the volunteer work that you do, even in the midst of dealing with all of your own losses and all the difficulties of your disease. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here.
Well, I was thinking because epidermolysis bullosa is it's actually a very rare disease. Most of our listeners may never have heard of it before. So maybe you could start by just telling us a little bit about the disease and the symptoms that you have had to deal with for all of your life.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so it is a genetic condition, so I was born with it. I was born in Jamaica, and at a time when I was really lucky that somebody had just recently read about it in a journal, a doctor there, so they were able to diagnose me very quickly. I was really lucky for that. But yeah, so it basically just means that my body doesn't produce enough of the glue that holds the layers of skin together. Some say like it doesn't produce it at all. It depends on how you look at it. And for me, I have the recessive dystrophic form of EB, so RDEB. So basically, I have wounds akin to third-degree burns, at various stages of it goes all the way to the third layer. So some wounds are superficial, some are a bit deeper. And I have bandages that I need to wear to protect me from the elements and manage infections and things of that nature. So for me, I have wounds on my limbs and where I sit, and some people like, and my head too, but some people have wounds like on their trunk area and their back, but I've been fortunate that that's not a problem for me as it stands right now, at least, but things change. I get corneal abrasions in my eyes when I sleep, and that just happens periodically just during the night, just because. I've heard different ophthalmologists tell me, it's like maybe I don't close my eyes as completely, and the air dries out the eye, so I have to put in lubricants in my eyes at night and drops during the day, and corneal abrasions can be really painful, and so like I never know what's gonna happen from day to day, so it totally changes my schedule depending on what happens, and I can't see very well too. But I also have like strictures in my esophagus, so I get like my skin, it doesn't grow back normally. It grows with scar tissue. So when I eat, I have sores in my mouth too. So it's basically affects everywhere there's skin inside and out of the body, the mucous membrane. So just eating certain foods can cause blisters, and then swallowing can cause friction in my esophagus, and then the healing can narrow it and cause a stricture. So then I have to have a dilation to help widen the stricture so I can eat without choking, essentially. And yeah, my fingers have fused into a fist, so I was born with like fingers and toes like everyone else. But as I grew, my nails fell off, and then with the scar tissue, they started to fuse together. But a lot of kids now with RDEB, because they've learned from like old people like me, they know not what to do. So some really ingenuitive moms came up with ways to wrap the hands now. So a lot of kids with RDEB don't have to worry about their fingers squeezing as a result of that. But like, yeah, so I lost the ability to use my thumb years back. But yeah, I still managed to drive and do different things. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's remarkable. You drive, you attended university and won writing awards for your poetry, and you volunteer in hospice. And it's so remarkable because I'm sure that dealing with this illness, it's an everyday thing. There are things you have to do every single day just to care for yourself. And yet you found time to make this life for yourself that's actually a beautiful service to other people. And that's what I admire so much, that you've been able to do that.
thanks. Well, it really helps me, gives me purpose and gives me direction. So it it's what's keeping me going right now, to be honest. But yeah, like I have to do bandages. Um, a full dressing change for me takes about 3 to 4 hours, depending on who does it. Um, there's some areas that are really infected that I have to change every day. So that might, like a partial change might take about an hour or so. And yeah, because I have to do different soaks and things of that nature to help manage infections and things. That's always been my personal issue. Like I'm saying this for me because everybody with RDB has their own thing that is their challenge. So for me, I have always had like chronic infections and systemic infections. So like it's a constant thing, and it has peaks and valleys. Like recently, I had a bit of a peak, and I had to go on some antibiotics, and sometimes oral is not enough, and then I have to go on eat IV antibiotics, and it's like a whole thing.
Yeah. When you wrote to me, you mentioned growing up because this is such a rare disease. You're not likely to know anyone in your neighborhood or your community where you live who deals with this, and so you grew up feeling lonely and isolated in a way because you felt so different from everyone else. But tell us about, I guess it was when you were 12, you got to go to a summer camp where you met some other kids your age.
Yeah, yeah, I did. So yeah, like none of my siblings have EB or anything, so it's just me and my family that has this condition. And like when I was really young, at around 5, I met someone for the first time with EB. And it was so fascinating to me because I was just watching her because for the first time I saw someone that walked like me and like moved like me. And it was just so interesting, like to see my reflection in a sense. Like it was, and it stayed with me. I'm really bad. I have a horrible memory. So I forgot her name, but like that experience like stayed with me. So when I was 12, I was doing like this trial and in New York, and this nurse just happened to have just gone to camp the year before and told my mom about it, and she got all the contact information, and then I was able to go, and it was really incredible because I was able to meet people for the first time, and that it felt like I could see myself in the world for the first time, and I really grew to find some really big bonds that stayed with me for my whole life since then.
Yeah, so you really found like a family in a
Yeah,
sense of other people who also have EB. And I can just imagine for a girl of 12, like what a difference that must have meant to you to just to feel less alone and also to have someone who totally knew everything that you were going through and experiencing.
exactly. Yeah, so a lot of my friends were older than me, and one of our counselors had RDEB, and she was going to university at the time. And so, I was listening to her and how she was moving in the world, and she was an incredible singer and super talented in so many different ways, and just a super nice person. And it was amazing. I felt like a big connection, and one of my friends that I met originally, um, Christina, she really was an advocate and EB awareness pioneer in her own right. Like she had websites, and she knew like all this big community of people, and if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have met so many people because she went to camp a year or two after I did. And we became pen pals, and she enjoyed it so much she told her friends, and then they came the next year, so I got to meet more people, and I got to meet my best friend, and yeah, and my counselor Jamie, who had RDEB too, she became like my big sister. So and and everybody there, like the doctors and nurses, that they volunteer their time there, and all the counselors would have some kind of skin condition as well. And yeah, it was an incredible place to really experience
Yeah,
life for the first
it
time.
it really sounds life changing and made such a difference to you, and maybe even um it maybe even inspired some of the work that you've been able to do now because you saw other people living with this disease and how they navigated life, and that's such an important lesson to learn.
It is, yeah, you know that saying, if you can see her, you can be her. I guess like for me, I never really had like a traditional, I'm not a traditional person where I like have these fantasies of like what I'm gonna be when I grow up. I just never thought about it really. And just like seeing Jamie, knowing she was going to university, I was like, okay, I guess that's something that I could do, knowing that, Jessica drove, and knowing that that's something that I could do too. That's the only thing that I always wanted to do was driving. But yeah, like just knowing that they were moving in the world in this way, living on their own, I I knew that if they were doing it, then it was possible for me to do it as well.
And then you were a counselor at that same camp yourself for a while.
Yes. So when I got old enough to I wanted to pay it forward, provide the same atmosphere for the same experience for other kids that have EB and all the other conditions that were at skin disorders that were at camp too.
And Novelette, I know, well, you've suffered so many losses personally, physically in your own body, but that also you've um, you've had a lot of grief as you've grown older, um, because of your good close friends that you made who have now died from this disease.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as we moved forward and got older, this disease is not one that is kind to the ages, a lot of people. One of the first person that I met and was close with, a Lorian, I met at camp for the first time. She and I were the exact same age, and she passed away in 2006 from cancer. And yeah, and then the next year we lost Christina, and then the next year we lost another friend, and that just kept going on and on and on. And it left just like me and Jessica and Jamie and Vanessa, and then eventually Jessica and Jamie both got really sick around the same time. Their cancers became like uh to the point where there wasn't anything the doctors could do because they had it off and on their whole lives, like after a certain point, and they had to have different surgeries and different things, but at a certain point it goes internally, and there wasn't much they could do. And the anticipatory grief, I wish I had learned about that, because maybe my experience, I would have been a little bit of a better friend. But like, it was a lot. Like, Jessica was my best friend and my soulmate. I feel like soulmates come in so many different forms. And I feel like she was that for me. Like, she got me in so many different ways. Like, we both had the same temperament of life, and I just was inspired by her strength and all the things that she had to do and overcome in her life. And, we just were each other's like everything. As long as she was around, I was good. And then when she was dying, like it was overwhelming. Like I didn't know what to do. Like I felt like, okay, I'm gonna be alone now. I'm gonna have to figure out how do I do this thing called life without her. And I think as a result, I was scared. So I was like, in some ways, pulling away. And I know she felt that. And I feel a lot of regrets for that. And it was really hard. But, and then towards the end, I was supposed to go visit her before she died, but she died. She got too sick before I could go. But her dad let me FaceTime with her and I got to say goodbye and then so that was 2013 and then Jamie passed away the following year and yeah, that year I got to visit with her. She lived in Utah. I love Utah. It's so beautiful. And I got to visit with her and just be with her, spend time with her. We had a surprise trip and we met in California, and I got to see her visiting another of our camp family, and it was really fun. So that was the last time I saw her in
Mm.
person, but we talked like every day, and then her husband, let me know when, you know, he was able to let her call me for the last time, and I was driving, and she was
Mm.
telling me goodbye, and it was like a lot. And I was like, like in those moments when there's nothing else to say, all you can say is I love you. And yeah, and so then she was gone the next day. She passed away. And
Wow.
yeah, so it was a lot, like, because we had seen so many friends of ours that passed away, but at least I had them, and then they were gone, and it was overwhelming, and I kind of just pulled back from everything. I went to camp the following year after Jamie died, but I didn't go back after that. Um, Usually they do like this little memorial thing at camp when people pass away, so I wanted to be there for that. And but yeah, it was a lot. So I was like super numb for a little while there before I started working in hospice.
Yeah. And then you started studying grief, it sounds like, for yourself. And even you wrote that um, using mindfulness on the grief journey. And so I've been curious to know, what you learned about grief, if that has been helpful to you as you've been on this journey, and how you managed to cope, because you're still grieving. Grief doesn't come to an end, and still all the losses um with it for you physically and personally, but all these people that you have loved.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot, so my uncle passed away suddenly and it was really traumatic, and my aunt and him were together like since they were like young teenagers, and just seeing her go through that, it was like a lot. But then she started going to bereavement groups and therapy, and that inspired me, I thought, and it was helping her because she was like so sad and it was so hard. And so to see her move through that and that it was helping, it inspired me. Okay, I'm going to do something different. Let me do therapy. Let me see about doing a bereavement group, see what that's like. And I did it. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to become a hospice volunteer. I'll do that. And so then I did that and I went through the training and I met my mentor and teacher and now friend, and she taught me all this lovely things about, grief literacy, and it really literally opened my eyes and I felt seen in a way that I hadn't felt seen since they died, essentially. And so it was super comforting and eye-opening just to understand what was happening to me and what grief was really about. And I had no timetable, and that there isn't a right or wrong way to do it. And that just really comforted me and made me feel okay. I could kind of like breathe and settle. And so I started doing that. And I started volunteering, and I did a mixed loss group as a co-facilitator, and then I did a mindfulness group, and that led me to learning a lot about mindfulness. I had done like an MBSR uh, group just as a client before, but I didn't know much beyond that. So it was really interesting to start learning about mindfulness and how that can be impactful on the grief journey. So it's more empowered me, and I enjoy, like, I'm just super curious, so I just go wherever the curiosity takes me, and then I like to share that with the clients that I interact with, and they seem to appreciate it. So it's been good. It's been informative for me, learning about mindful self-compassion has been really impactful and helpful for me on my journey. Just giving myself a little grace, for the things that I didn't know before, and knowing that, common humanity, that grief is just a natural human experience that we all feel by virtue of just loving someone and losing them. And so that also just helped to know that it's okay. It's okay that I was afraid. It's okay that I was scared and didn't know what to do. And, of course I would feel that way. Like my whole world was changing. So it really has given me a lot of, tools, I guess you could say, to help me continue on the grief journey.
Mm. It's really beautiful, to hear that you were dealing with multiple losses, again, personal physical losses, but your friends and the people you loved who died, and that you were able to find practices that helped you with that, and then inspired you to want to teach other people, which is just really beautiful. That's truly grace, when you feel like you're kind of overflowing with the benefit of what you've learned, and you just want to share it with someone else to help them on their journey. And that's I just admire that so much about you.
Thank you.
So I don't know if there are any like specific practices that you use. I mean, I know mindfulness in general, but are there any other things you could share that, or that you teach to people who are grieving, that could be helpful to someone listening in?
Hmm. That's a good question. Yeah, like one of the things that I've learned just in general is that, there's no right or wrong way to do mindfulness. And it doesn't have to be about getting rid of your thoughts, because thinking is the brain's prime directive.
Mhm.
And it's about just shifting your attention, and that is the most skillful part, knowing when you're getting distracted, and focusing on your breath. The that's the magic piece, as they say. And I learned a lot from Heather Stang's book, Mindfulness and Grief. And now I'm getting to personally learn from her in her Awaken Pro program, which has been really nice. And just listening to, certain meditations that can help at the beginning, kind of like at the acute beginning stages. It's so stressful. Grief can be so stressful, and your mind can go on so many different tangents. And I recently learned this mantra meditation that can help with like settling your thoughts and, helping to evoke that relaxation response. And so essentially, you just focus on, say, a word as innocuous as like blue or the number one. And like on each out breath, you just like focus on, you just say that word blue, blue, or you could have like a phrase or a prayer that you like to use, and you could do that on each out breath instead. I know Heather says sometimes using like your person's name, your loved one's name, can be a bit distracting. So don't, to begin with, it might not be helpful if you do that, but like using just a word. And I recently did this last week with my clients and they seem to enjoy it. So yeah, that's one I would recommend. I would recommend just like mindful self-compassion meditations, like self-compassion break or soothing touch meditation. Like this week I'm going to be talking about mindfulness is about, accepting, being aware of the present moment, accepting it as it is with kindness and compassion, and being with what is with kindness and compassion. And I think that is like one of the secret sauces, I feel like, that is so impactful when you can learn to be with what is with just kindness and gentleness instead of like resistance and avoidance, but just being there alongside it with this nurturing, tender way of being. And, knowing it's, that common humanity that we're all human beings that suffer, and treating ourselves like we would a good friend. I think that is so important, especially when you're grieving, giving yourself grace for those things that you regret, things that you wish you did differently.
That's so beautiful. And I love that emphasis on being with what is, because this is reality. Like the way things are right now, the way it is the truth. It's real. This is what's actually happening. And we create our own even more suffering for ourselves if we try to resist it or we try to change it or push it away. It's when you can learn that skill of just of being able to be in the moment with what's happening right now. I can attest to that too. You can find equanimity there, really, and a certain amount of peace no matter what else is happening around you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like walking a middle path, as they call it. Not overindulging in our suffering, but not avoiding it either, but just being able to just be with it with kindness, like you would, being tender towards a good friend. You know, I I feel like if that's the part where I what I like about mindfulness is teaching to be with the present moment is hard. Like I love your podcast. So I recently just finished the Grieving Brain, uh, with Dr. Mary Francis, and she was talking about uh the present and how impactful that can be on the grief journey, and just like how that's where possibility is. That's where you can find new connections and new relationships, like you can't, you don't know about the future or the past, but in the now is where the possibilities lay. And I thought that was so beautiful, that idea of like there's possibility in the now in such a way that you can't get anywhere else. So I think that's one of the beauties that mindfulness helps us to get at, is that being with whatever is. And it doesn't mean that acceptance doesn't mean we have to like it,
Mm-hmm.
or it just means that we're acknowledging it. As you said, they say suffering equals pain times resistance. So just being able to just be with it with that tenderness, that kindness, and knowing that it's okay. It's okay to feel this way. It's okay that you're still sad 10 years later, 20 years later. There's no time limit,
Mm-hmm.
like I recently just passed the 10-year mark with Jessica being gone, and that was a lot for me. But to know that, I'm definitely at a different place than I was at the beginning, but you know, I feel like I'm integrating and metabolizing, as they say. So yeah, but it's still hard, and that's okay. It's not, there's no right or wrong way. So that helps me to feel a sense of safety, I guess you could say, to be
Mm-hmm.
with whatever I need to be with, and know that I'm okay just as I am.
Mm. Yeah, that's really beautiful. And then to know that you and even as you're working on your own grief process, you're experiencing it in the moment. You're still dealing with your own grief, but that's actually is a time of possibility when you can help another person just by sharing what it's like and what you've learned. Other people can be helped. And so I think that's an important reminder for all of us, no matter how much, because all of us are suffering something. All of us have had losses. We're all experiencing pain, but to know in a way, we might even be the very best teachers for other people when we come from that open-hearted place of just being with what is. This is how life is for me right now. That might be when we actually could reach out and be the most helpful to someone else.
Yeah, yeah. Like as you said, my life involves a lot. So to be honest, all I could do is what's in front of me. That's how I get through each day, is just getting to what's in front of me, and then the next thing and the next thing. If I think about it too much and the different stressors that I have, it would be too overwhelming. So little bits at a time works for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. Well, I was curious to know, because you've spent all of your 37 years, you've been, I imagine, in and out of hospitals and surgeries and doctors' offices and receiving constant medical care. And so I'm curious for anyone, who's in healthcare who might be listening, if you could share with us a little bit about from your perspective as a patient, are there things that healthcare providers have done for you that have been really helpful? I guess you already shared one, which was the nurse who told you about the camp when you were 12, how amazing that was. But are there things healthcare providers can do that are helpful? Are there things that healthcare providers do that are not helpful and more hurtful, just to kind of teach us who are out there in the world how we could do a better job?
Yeah. Yeah. I enjoy the doctors that take the time to listen and get to know me and know that, my life, yes, it involves all the medical stuff, but there are other parts of who I am as well. And just even just taking the time to say, like I had two different recently, I went to the oncologist and I usually have to deal with these fellows, and one of them is kind of like rigid, and then I met another one and they were like, okay, so how are you doing? And I could tell that they were open and willing to hear everything. And like I was telling this other person similar stuff, and they were like, oh, that's not our department. But I told this person and they listened and they went and got help for me. And I thought, what a difference
Mm.
just from one person to the other, just being able to just receive and being open. I know that it's an assembly line to some degree, and you have to get to the next person and the next person. And it's hard to kind of be present and take that moment just to really say, so how are you doing? And being really willing to listen. Like people can ask that question, but to me, it's like a greeting, like hi or hello. People don't really want to know the answer. So, like, if I can sense that this person is receptive and really wants to hear, well, I'm not sleeping great, or whatever it is, then I'm more likely to tell them things. But if I sense that you're not really receptive, you didn't really come prepared reading my file, you don't really know what is happening with me. Like, I recently got diagnosed with cancer for the first time, and I was going to a plastic surgeon to get a consultation whether or not they can do anything because it was in my hand. And the person that came to me hadn't read my file. They didn't even know that I had EB. I had to explain everything to them. They wanted me to take off my dressing. They couldn't tell what the cancer looked like. They were just like woefully unprepared to receive. And they had no idea. And the doctor was like, well, the only thing, I'll set you up with someone so that they can amputate your hand. That was their only recommendation. There wasn't any nuance or any, like my life, like even though my hands don't look like much to you people, I use them and I do a lot. And so it was just very disappointing. And so, yeah, it was a horrible experience. But yeah, my mom was very disappointed because she was expecting something a little bit more finesse. But I suspected that's what they were going to say because that's just what they do here. But yeah, like, is having someone with being kind and compassionate, it just goes a long way to being receptive and letting a patient will really talk to you about what's wrong. And you might actually learn something about what's actually happening if they know that you don't seem like you have the time or you're not that interested. People aren't going to be eager to tell you about their problems. They probably might not want to bother you.
Yeah. So if you're a provider who really genuinely wants to make a difference and help. It's just that it's that capacity, I think, again, to be present, for the provider to be present enough to actually listen, hear what you're saying. And a lot of times I found it doesn't take that much extra time. You're you're right there ready and willing to tell them what you need. All they have to do is show you that they're listening, and they'll hear you. But then to be able to use that creativity in the moment of, oh, you could see this person, oh, this idea came to me, I'll refer you here. There's genuine help you could be receiving, but that you may not get sometimes if your providers just don't listen, if they're just in their own
Mhm.
heads and they've already decided what they're going to recommend. They don't even feel like they
Exactly.
hear from you, which that it crushes me whenever I hear stories of medical providers who behave that way with patients. I understand where the providers come from. They're busy, they're overwhelmed themselves, and they themselves have never learned how to be present or how to be mindful or how to open their own hearts. But no wonder they burn out in the work they do, because they're not having those deeper, really gratifying interactions with patients where they come away knowing like, oh my gosh, like we connected. I really connected with that person. I see who she is. That is what can keep you going,
Mhm.
in a busy field, if you're able to make those real connections. But anyway, if you can't listen and you can't be present for someone, you don't get to have those deeper experiences.
It's so, so true. Yep. Time and time again, that has happened to me, and it's very, very frustrating when I feel like I'm not. And also person-centered care, like it everybody's different and has their own unique needs and thing, but you have to know, okay, maybe this person needs their hand to do the things that they do in life. So what are things that we can do to help her keep her hand and not like that is your only option? You know what I mean? Like think of the person and what they're experiencing. That can be so important. Like I'm struggling right now to get nursing care, and they don't want to work with me in a equitable way, and it's very, very frustrating.
Oh, I'm sure. And I'm sure because of the rareness of your condition, the rarity of it, you meet a lot of doctors and nurses who've never treated anyone with epidermolysis bullosa before. Even dermatologists, probably, yes, but in other area fields of medicine, people who just have no idea, and they don't know how to be sensitive or caring toward you, and just what you might need in your day-to-day life.
Exactly. It's so true. Many people, but you can tell some people that even though they don't know, they're willing to listen and willing to learn from you and take their cues from you. And those people I can respect and I can work with. Um, but the people that I can tell, haven't read my file, don't really care to go through the difficulties of trying to figure out how to work within the situation I have, you know, then that's never goes well. But yeah, they have to be willing to want to do it, and it takes a lot of work. And people turn me away sometimes because they just don't want to deal with the work that it takes to handle my care.
Yeah, it's big. It's really big, to hear your story. I bet your file's very thick. And just listening to everything that you've been through, you are carrying this amazing, huge load on your shoulders. And I understand for some people that might seem intimidating, and yet you carry it with the grace that you describe, you carry it lightly in a way, and you stay in the present moment, and you find a way to make whatever you can out of every moment of your life, which is amazing. And that's really what each one of us should be aspiring to do in our own lives.
Yeah, yeah. I'm very fortunate to have found, hospice and bereavement and being in this field as that given me that sense of purpose and reason to get up in the morning, which is so important, especially as I go through appointments and treatments and different things. I have something to get through on the other side of it, so it doesn't have to become like my whole life. Having that purpose gives me that thing to look forward to, and knowing even though I know I'm helping, it helps me a lot more, like I get to help my mentor with training new hospice volunteers, and that's really rewarding. I get to hang out with her and she's super cool, and just being able to see them, blossom into, all these self realizations as they're listening to these things for the first time. Sometimes I forget because it's now so like, normal to me, but it's so novel to them. And just listening about grief, changes their whole world for the first time, and getting to help with, training bereavement volunteers, that's been really great too. And yeah, so those are the kinds of things that I do that help to move me through the other not so fun stuff.
Well, and Novelette, now, I mean, I'm so grateful that you were willing to join me for this conversation too, because as it goes out on the airwaves, there will be a lot of people listening who I believe will be helped by our conversation too, and inspired by you, which I have been just by hearing your story and just by seeing how you move through the world and the love and the beauty that you bring to other people. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for just your, I guess, your determination to keep doing this meaningful work, and to find purpose in that, and then also for your willingness to share your story, which I'm sure that has been hard as well, to talk about everything, and so I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's just fun to get to hang out with you. I feel really privileged. So it's
Oh.
exciting.
Well, well, I'm the one who feels I feel privileged to get to talk to you, because um, you are a rare person in very many ways, and you've met this challenge that life has handed you in such a beautiful way. So I really do want to thank you so much, and I'm glad that you were willing to come on here and talk with me and to share things that you've learned and things you've experienced on your own journey through life. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Novelette Munroe. I am just so touched by her story and also so inspired by the work that she's doing. So I'm really honored to be able to share that interview with everyone out there who's listening. And thanks for joining us for that. Remember to subscribe, leave a rating and review, and make a small contribution if you can at eoluniversity.com/support. I'll be back next week. So until then, take care and be well. Bye-bye.